All right, since it's a couple minutes after 5, why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jake Coburn. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Community Development Partnership, and I want to welcome you to our community conversation tonight. For those of you who have not joined before to one of these events, this is a series of online opportunities for us to highlight the work of the CDP and update donors and supporters about the work that we're doing at the Community Development Partnership. And tonight, I'm really pleased that we've got Brett Tolley, who's a board member of the CDP and Chatham resident, and works with the Chatham 365 Task Force, as well as Carolyn McClellan, who's also works with the Chatham 365 Task Force, to talk a bit about their efforts in Chatham. But before we turn to them, I wanted to give you all just a quick update about some of the things that are going on at the CDP since we last had our event. With all of our colleagues at the CDP vaccinated or about to be fully vaccinated within the coming weeks, we'll be returning to our offices on July 1st. There are some folks who have been working out of the office for quite some time now, but we'll be kind of opening the offices as usual. Although having, I think, learned quite a bit about remote working and the flexibility that it affords members of our team, we will be allowing a number of our employees to work part-time remotely, with folks kind of being in the office a minimum of 2 days a week. And so I think we're all excited to be back together again, collaborating, communicating with a bit more ease, but also really excited about the opportunity to have a bit more flexibility in our schedules and spending a little bit less commuting time for those of us that have a little bit of a drive to the CDP's offices in Eastham. We're going to continue to, however, keep our offices closed to the public until we kind of get settled into a routine and work out a few more details. But I think we hope to become much more available to the public after Labor Day, and to start holding some in-person events and trainings. Although I think we are also going to continue to, for ease of participation, also continue to do remote meetings and offer video conferencing as an alternative to in-person meetings. Some great news: our small business support team continues to move out community development block grant funded small business grants. We've now distributed over $400,000 to 43 small businesses on the outer and lower Cape. And last week received word of some supplemental funding from the Mass Growth Capital Corporation to the tune of $112,000, and we are currently searching for a small business technical assistance manager to join our team so that we can expand our efforts in helping small businesses recover from the economic crisis related to COVID-19, but as well as to strengthen and deepen our outreach and the work that we do to support entrepreneurship on the Lower Cape. We also received the great news of funding from the Division of Banks for our first-time homebuyer program, which is going to allow us to also strengthen and expand the offerings of our first-time homebuyer training, both online and in person. And then finally, I think the best news for last, we will be holding our 7th annual Summer Evening on the Farm event at Halcyon Farm in Brewster on August 25th. Tickets are available at our website at capecdp.org, and we're thrilled to be able to hold this event in person at Halcyon Farm and gather as a community to celebrate the work of the CDP as well as to raise important resources for us to continue to do that work. So I think you've probably all been reading in the paper, and certainly many of you experiencing firsthand waiting in lines at restaurants and stores. The housing crisis is really reached a tipping point on the lower and outer Cape. And that has certainly been building for several years now and intensified over the last several months with a very hot real estate market. And that all of our towns are facing a shortage in housing availability for families and working people in the community. And in Chatham, I think that crisis has become even more acute, and also faced with discussions about the possibility of closing the Chatham Elementary School due to declining population and declining enrollment, has galvanized our guest speakers and many in the Chatham community to organize a Chatham 365 task force to focus on the local policy and decisions that can be made or be made differently to support a stronger year-round community in Chatham. And so I'm really pleased tonight to welcome Brett and Carolyn to talk about the work of the 365 task force. Carolyn has lived in Massachusetts all of her life and came to Chatham when she was 19. Her family bought a small restaurant, which they ran for 13 years. But by her mid-30s, she found herself divorced with 2 small children. And fortunately, through the efforts of Habitat for Humanity, she became the first Chatham Habitat homeowner. And that was 20 years ago. And so since then, in an effort to pay it forward, she has volunteered with Habitat, worked on various committees at Habitat, including fundraising and sharing, the Family Partnership Committee. This past year, she stepped down from most of her work at Habitat so she could focus her energies here in Chatham. And she serves on the Chatham Affordable Housing Committee, now known as the Chatham Community Housing Partnership, and recently stepped up as chair. And then Brett Tolley is from a 4-generation commercial fishing family out of Chatham. Excuse me. He's currently the national program coordinator for the Northwest Atlantic Marine Alliance, where he focuses on movement, building, and policy. Brett has a long history as an advocate and community organizer, starting out in Brooklyn, fighting for low-income residents in housing court and organizing campaigns around housing and workers' rights. He's written and produced an award-winning documentary about the migrant experience along the U.S.-Mexico border titled Dying to Get In. He was also selected to the We Are All Brooklyn Fellowship Program and completed both the Rockwood Leadership Institute's Art of Leadership Program and the Heal Alliance School of Political Leadership. Brett has served on the 365 task force, currently serves on the boards of the Chatham Harvesters Cooperative and Local Catch, and has been a board member at the Community Development Partnership for a bit over a year. And Brett and Carolyn, welcome, and we're really excited to learn more about your efforts in Chatham.
Jay.
Well, thank you, Jay, and thank you for the introduction. And just listening to Brett's resume there.
That was way too long.
No, it was fabulous. It was fabulous. So we thought I'd go first because prior to the 365's birth, we worked on the Affordable Housing Committee in Chatham. And there were always lots of obstacles to affordable housing development, but certainly working within a committee like that, I mean, there's so many things you can't do. We try to push move the ball forward and down the court. But in the past, we've not had the voice that we wanted in the community. We've been told when we try to push for things, oh, this isn't the right time. Town meeting has this going on. We don't want to do that. We did do a series of videos, which we're very proud of, which were great. But then what do you do after that? It's hard to capitalize on them. How many times can you show them? We showed them at the Orpheum. These are just general videos about housing need in Chatham, trying to dispel some of the regular myths that people have. So they're nice, but they're not doing that much. I mean, we're proud of them and they do have an impact, but we want houses. So how do we get there? And then with any committee like this, you're limited by who's on the committee, the talent pool you have, how long people stay, their experience. I've been there a long time, probably, I'm not sure, 8 or 9 years. And I knew nothing then, and I know very little now. And I got a lot of bumps and bruises, but time has moved on, and I've learned a few things. In this past couple of years, some of the movement we've had is with 365, and another key point was when the Finance Committee decided to take on the issue of housing and did a really deep dive into the critical needs of Chatham's housing, and published a report and saying that housing was the top financial need for Chatham. And so having that voice alongside ours gave us so much more credibility, gave us a seat at the table. It wasn't just the affordable housing people talking about this. Obviously, as you know, it's become an issue for everybody. It's affected every aspect of society, whether it's the business community or schools. It's everywhere. Everybody knows somebody who needs housing. It's no longer the other people. So that's aided us in an odd way. It's gotten worse, so it amplifies the message. So those are some of the difficulties we've had and how we've come to this point. Having the FinCon come on board, and then the other key point was when the town requested that they organize this 365 task force to do an analysis of where we are and where do we want to go, some forward thinking, some planning. And that really gave us the three things. We're working here in our committee. You have FinCom, which is representing the business end of the community, making it more an authentic conversation, a more conversation that reaches a broader spectrum of folks. And then you have 365 doing this grassroots deep dig into what it is the community need, where do we have to affect all the sectors, how they all come together, and then creating a grassroots network. And I'm going to pass it over to Brett to talk a little bit more about the origins of 365 and all the nuances there.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. So when Carolyn and I first connected, it was late last fall, and the grassroots capacity of Chatham 365 was about 10 of us. Carolyn came to one of our meetings, and a lot was built from there. And so in the past 10 months, we've built the Chatham 365 network to include about 1,500 followers on Facebook, over 200 people subscribe to a newsletter. We have a website. We have about 100 active volunteers that are engaged in elementary school advocacy and housing advocacy and beyond, as well as now a core group of about 15 who meet regularly, at least once a month. And that's all done volunteer. There's no outside money. There's no support, financial support. But there's been a lot of donated blood, sweat, and tears into the past 10 months. And so let me tell a little story of how we got there. And one important distinction, as Carolyn alluded to, back in 2018, and Jay alluded to this, in 2018, the town finally wanted to do something formal to address the living crisis. I won't even call it a housing crisis. It's a housing crisis. It's a jobs crisis. It's a demographics crisis on so many levels. The heart and lifeblood of Chatham's community is being sucked dry, and it probably took decades for the town of Chatham and the right makeup of the select board to actually address it. They formed a task force. It was 10 people. Myself and my wife were part of it. We spent a year asking two basic questions to the community. One is, what's the problem with year-round living in Chatham? And then two is, what solutions do folks feel like we should explore? And we had forums, we did surveys, we engaged a couple hundred people, and it resulted in about a 30-page report with some really good recommendations that spanned housing, jobs, all kinds of other infrastructure pieces within the town that would support what we called a vibrant and thriving year-round community. So it's pretty good. And then at the end of it, we all recognize that, well, and this is maybe to Carolyn's point with committees, right? Like, you can put forward great ideas on the table. You can even move them through committees. You can even move them to the select board level. But if you don't have a steady drumbeat of advocacy behind those policy recommendations and ideas, nothing happens, right? So that was the birth of what we then call the Chatham 365 advocacy group. And it was important to distinguish because at one point we were a formal town entity that delivered this report, and then our task was complete and we were formally dissolved by the town. And then our advocacy grassroots group kind of kept momentum going, but it was important for us not to give the impression that we were part of the town. So just a couple important moments for us. This goes back to when Carolyn and I first connected. Very soon after that in the fall, we were hearing about momentum to consolidate and regionalize our elementary school, which would effectively, what we felt be a sort of, nail in the tombstone, or for all of our efforts to attract young folks and to think about year-round residency, to lose our elementary school and the threat of losing our elementary school really fired us up as that group of 10 people that met with Carolyn. But we knew it was firing up all of our friends and our neighbors, and for all the folks who identify with the housing crisis, but don't always have something concrete to point to. Say, like, this is what it looks like when the crisis is happening. Because usually it's like folks leaving, and it's hard to quantify that, or it's hard for folks' imagination to really, or in their hearts, I guess, really in their hearts, to have them feel what that impact is. But the loss of our elementary school, the threat of the loss of our elementary school was a really big catalyst. And so we did a survey, we reached a couple hundred people, and that was really a spark for us. And it was a natural connection to, we heard this through the survey, that folks were identifying that shrinking elementary school was a problem. However, it wasn't necessarily a problem for educational purposes or to the mission of the school even. In some cases, it's actually, kids are getting pretty good education or great education. But it was a problem because it was symbolic of the housing crisis. And if that wasn't addressed, there would be no future for the elementary school. So that allowed us to engage a lot of young folks. We connected the dots to housing articles that had moved through the Housing Partnership Committee, through the Select Board. We had 6 pretty progressive articles, and that was a good focal point for our group to rally and connect the dots between those who cared about the elementary school as a symptom of the disease of the housing crisis and channel energy. And so before I kick it back to Carolyn to share how our town meeting actually went and what happened with those 6 articles, just to give you a sense of the Chatham 365 advocacy group and what we did. We had 4 different teams, maybe 20 different people spread out. And we sent 1,000 postcards to the community. We did phone banking. We put out 100 yard signs around the community. We worked with the local paper, and we had a series of 5 articles that elevated the stories of people who were benefiting or could benefit from affordable, attainable housing. And we got on social media pretty heavily. Had a lot of people connecting and diving deeper into the conversation with us to get educated about these articles and what that meant. And we even got 10 local businesses to help promote getting out the vote. They gave it little treats as incentives, so that if someone showed their voting card to these, and anyone who's from Chatham here, you can still do this if you voted. You show your voting card to these 10 businesses that took part in our Get Out the Vote, they'll give you a little treat, a little donut or a coffee or a 15% discount at some of these businesses. And so we made a difference. We made an impact on the conversation and some of the votes. And I'll let Carolyn talk about that.
All right, thanks, Brett. So one of the questions I think we pondered was looking at the demographics. Who do we want to go after? Do we want to go after our like-minded people or people that we know are interested in this but don't go to town meeting and try to get them to go to town meeting? Or do we try to target people that we know to go to town meeting and try to, you know, if they're on the fence, push them one way or the other? So, I mean, creating the conversation potentially is doing both, but as a target, I think we were more interested or more hopeful about trying to get people to town meeting. So we had we actually had 7 items. Four of them were about land acquisition, property acquisition, and 3 of them were about financing. We lost one before the town meeting. It was bought from underneath us. It never made it to the warrant. A private person bought it and a butter bought it, so it wouldn't be developed as affordable housing. And then there were 3 other properties, and they were very different. One was a big parcel that's forested that has been on the warrant before for housing and it failed. It was on the warrant for Council on Aging and it failed. And we tried to get it back on for this time. We wanted it for housing for quite a while. It's a 19-acre parcel and it had approximately 8 acres that could be built on. So we were really hopeful for that. Then there was another property that was a town-owned property. It's an old house that's fallen apart that was deed restricted, and now we have it, and we were hoping to be able to develop that in the barn, make 1 or 2, maybe even 3 units out of it. And then another property that the Housing Trust was working on, and that property the Housing Trust could buy, and the item on the warrant was to use free cash, for the town to vote to use free cash, so the lot could be developed for capital A and attainable. So those were our you know, the parcels we wanted. You know, we want to walk away with this with something in our hands. And the one that was for the Housing Trust, that was up first, that we passed significantly with, I want to say 80%. We didn't take a count, but we did really, really well on that. We were very happy, really motivated and optimistic about the one we really wanted, which is called Middle Road, which is that 19-acre lot. And Middle Road has a deep history. It's the abutters they're not abutters, but they live on the other side of the pond, and there's a neighborhood there. They're very local, multi-generational, and they banded together. And we certainly feel that they just don't want affordable housing in their neighborhood, but they lapped on to the conservation argument, and they showed up in force, and we needed a 2/3 majority, and we barely got a majority. So we lost that property. So that was very disappointing. And the town-owned property, we won easily. So the other 3 articles, which were about the financing, we also won very easily. They were the CPA and the Housing Trust being able to allow us to use some funds for capital A and attainable. Those passed. They have to go to the state for approval. And the transfer tax, to have a transfer tax on $2 million properties, that passed. I anticipated an argument from the Realty Association. They did a campaign on Facebook and stuff right before. They've been vocal at the state level. They showed up at a couple of our local meetings, but they were not there at all in our town meeting, so that passed easily. The problems or the issues I think we had with our meeting and why we lost some of the, why we lost that big one, the Middle Road. I really think our town meeting is getting more and more progressive. I think the whole town is getting more progressive. And I think the main body of people who show up at town meeting are getting more and more progressive overall. But you need a supermajority to get the land. And any parcel that you come across, like this Middle Road parcel, already had a body of people. And it wasn't people who just didn't want, I don't want that in my backyard. They were all friends. They've grown up together. They're a consolidated group of folks who could be activated very quickly and showed up in droves. So once you have that, their thumb on the scale, you lose your supermajority. And then they also had the conservation. So that's disappointing, because I feel like we really, overall in the town meeting and in the community at large, we do have the majority. We do have that, but town meeting is a completely different deal. It's a completely different animal. And playing that game, I think in the moving forward, the lesson that I learned, as much as everything we did at 365, I don't, we had our core group go, and we did have people show up because of our involvement, but we didn't have a lot of people show up. We did increase the conversation. I think on a regular vote, like when people go to vote, those people will come out and just in the community, elevating that conversation and make people having a better understanding about housing, about the problems and the potential solutions. We've added to that conversation exponentially, but did we get people to show up at the town meeting that we needed? No. So moving forward, I think I would try to target the people that we think go to town meeting anyways. I would target the civic organizations, the men's club and those types of.
Oh, we lost Carolyn's audio for a little bit. Maybe give her like 10 seconds. Yeah, Carolyn, we don't catch your audio, but this happens with Carolyn's computer sometimes. It's a funny glitch. Where the audio.
How long was I gone?
The video keeps going. You're back.
How long was I gone?
It's like 10 or 15 seconds. You're going to say
10 or
like
15 minutes. Yeah.
The other lesson learned.
Brett, you need to do a signal to me, okay?
All right.
All right. So just the lesson learned is I think we need to use, I would, next time around, I would specifically target the civic organizations and try to work on trying to root out the people who go to town meeting. When we did the phone banking, we had a wonderful team. We had a woman who volunteered, and she had all this background knowledge. She's done the phone banking before. She reached out to the state Democratic, I don't know the title. They gave us information so we could have, we had a great way of who's voted in which meeting, how often they vote, their Democrat, Republican, we had all that information. You can get anything you want to know about somebody, but it doesn't tell you who goes to town meeting. That information is not there. You don't know. So that's the problem, because that's the question I want answered. Who goes? And then I want to go have a conversation with them. I want to do a presentation with them. I want to hear why they're not supporting something, but trying to find that information, that's really difficult. But I think that's our mission moving forward. And again, everything else that we've done has helped the conversation overall. And I think we got a great opportunity for future. I mean, we already have the network build. I mean, it took us so much work. Certainly for me, running around every spare minute trying to do stuff. And now we got that layer done, and we got a team out there of a dozen or so people who are really committed, who are well educated in terms of this process and housing, and they can be the leaders moving forward. It's not just me, it's not just Brett, it's a team of people that are available now. And so that's exciting. That's exciting for us. I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, right on. So I'll share just a couple reflections too on our town meeting and where we're at, and then we can kick it back to you, Jay, and open it up for the conversation aspect of our community conversation. So yeah, I'm keeping in mind that this year has just been a year like we've never ever experienced. And town meeting for us happened on a Saturday afternoon in June, a couple weeks after Memorial Day. And it's hard to know the impact that had, right? Especially for our young working folks. Summer weekends are the prime time working period, and that I know was really difficult. It's always difficult to attend 4 hours or plus if you're a working person and have a family, but I think this one in particular, the timing of it was hard. So I'm trying not to, it's hard to glean too much insight based on this particular turnout. But one question I want to pose to the group that I think about a lot in the big picture is, because the housing crisis is not unique to Chatham, right? This is happening Cape-wide, maybe being a little bit more felt on the Lower Cape. And we know that it's taken decades to get to this point. This didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one policy that did it. It wasn't one wave of outside investment that did it. This has been steadily happening for a long time. And so my sense is that to seriously address it and sort of turn that tide of the crisis, similarly, we can't do it. It's not going to be in one town meeting or two town meetings. That's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. This is work that needs to be done over 5, 10 years, 20 years plus. And so I think about, because the gravity of the crisis, as we rally folks and build a network and get a diverse range of people involved, how do we sustain that over a long period of time? Because what's not that hard to do is get people fired up in the short term, write some letters, do some petitions, show up at a meeting, and then it kind of dissolves a little bit because a lot of people either got burned out or maybe didn't get exactly what you hoped for in terms of the outcome. And so we've been trying to be really intentional about how do we avoid that? How do we make sure that those getting involved are enjoying maybe like the process of actually being involved in this as much as whatever outcomes that we achieve? How do we ensure, like what Carolyn said, that no one is being centered so much within this network that they're indisposable? How can at any point someone, if they need to take a break or step out because their kids or work or whatever, can do that and the work keeps going on with the vision of that slow and steady drumbeat? So yeah, we didn't get maybe the hardest or hardest to get housing article at this town meeting, and maybe we won't get it next year, but maybe year 3 we will, and maybe year 4 we'll get 2 of them, and year 5 we'll get 3 of them, and then by year 10, we're really starting to turn the tide. And so I look to those signals. Like, what does that mean? How do you know when that's happening, right? Like, how do you know when you are sustaining something? And I look to the core folks, maybe the 15 or 20 who really stuck it out over the last 10 months. And I think, are they more energized now than they were 10 months? Or are they a little bit less? And especially when maybe you don't get a big win or article that you're hoping for. And my sense is that 100%, like, we have more energy than when we started, and we have new folks. And I think a big part of that, getting those 5 out of the 6 articles advancing was a big help. But I think internally, just making sure that whenever we connect, we're doing it in a way that's kind of fun a little bit. It's not always getting down to business. We're not replicating like town committee or government meeting models where it's like Robert's Rules of Order and it gets really formal and it stifles creativity, right? We're trying to like open it up and actually get to know each other and care about each other. And in some ways actually model the kind of community that is our vision that we hold. So I think that to me is, one thing I feel like is a priority for our success going forward. I think we're achieving it little by little, but time will tell. All right, off to you, Jay.
Brett and Carolyn, thank you so much. Really appreciate your sharing this journey and the lessons learned. And I think you've raised a bunch of really great points and experiences that we've been seeing in other towns, that definitely holding town meetings on Saturdays in the spring, I think it's been very challenging for working people and working families and young families to be able to participate in a meeting format that or decision-making process, quite frankly, that is not real family friendly to begin with, particularly in this modern world in which we're living in. And then when you add the layer of requiring a 2/3 majority vote in order to acquire land or to borrow funds, that makes it even more difficult. So really appreciate the work you have done and the momentum that started. Would love to hear people's kind of comments and questions for Brett and and Carolyn. Fran McConnell.
Hi, it's really interesting to hear you guys talk about this because I've been watching the 365 from the outside, and I have to say, I thought you've done a fabulous job and you have been out there. Ellen and I went to one of your first meetings where you had everybody in town there talking about what's the problem. And it's just very impressive to see from the outside the momentum and the positive things. So it's interesting that I heard some discouragement from each of you. And yet from the outside, when I think about, you passed 5 of the 6 housing things, and that's great. And I read the article in the paper and I said, yes, but I hear you missed out on the one you maybe really wanted. But I just wanted to say, I think you're doing a great job, and I do hope you have that momentum that carries you along, and it is hard to maintain it, I have to say. With regard to the list of people, I was surprised, Carolyn, because not in housing, but when I worked on a local campaign, I have been able to get lists of people who attended town meeting, not how they voted, obviously, but lists of people who've attended. And if you get that over a period of time, people who've attended town meeting and people who vote locally, you really get the people who are participatory.
So any way you can tell me how to get that information? Because I knocked on lots of doors trying to get it, and I got no's all around. So
that is a public record that is available through the town clerk's office.
I tried to get. Okay, I will push harder because she told me.
And I would if you got a no from the town clerk, you need to go to the town manager, or to the chair of the select board, because that is public information. And you're right, it's not uploaded into Vote Builder or the other databases that campaigns use, but it is public information. And so you know,
what is it? A ream of things I have to go through the whole book and look.
No, it's most likely in an Excel spreadsheet, would be my guess, is how the town clerk has it available.
And I argued with them. I know they check you off. I know it's
right. Yeah.
Paper somewhere. Okay, I won't give up next time.
So,
thank you.
Jay, if I could just follow up with my campaign manager.
Sure.
Fran and I tracked voting records in the town of Orleans for 3 or 4 years before, in a very weak moment, I decided to run for select board. And we had every person who had attended a town meeting or voted in a town election. We knew who went. And then we geocoded those people. And then I walked the streets and I only knocked on the doors of those people that went. And I knocked on 1,500 doors. And interestingly enough, I ended up getting 1,500 votes. So it's public information and it's incredibly powerful to you. Now, as Fran says, you don't know how they vote, but you do know who are the activists. And what you discover is, in a town of Orleans, there are probably 200 to 300 people out of 5,500 registered voters that can be counted on to go to town meeting. Everybody else is sort of, yeah, I go, or I'm busy, or something like that. Yeah. And I think the strategy is to have that list and then keep track of who talks at town meeting on certain issues. Then you can begin to develop the people who can support you. One last thought, and I once went to a job where the planning department was a disaster and was a joke, and I had to figure out how to rebuild it. And we picked out something that was quite likely to pass under our jurisdiction, and that's the only warrant article we submitted in our first trip back to town meeting. And in some way, you sort of classify it as a no-brainer. It was going to pass. But the next year, when you went with a little bigger basket, you said, hey, we asked you to do this last year. You voted it. We did it. Now we'd like to take the next step. So sometimes you don't want to go with a big basket the first time. build the credibility first, and then you become sort of automatic. And when you look at town meeting warrants, there are many, many budgets and activities that are automatic. Nobody ever talks about them because that's part of town government. Even the municipal budget falls in that category usually. So anyways, that's part of the strategy to build the credibility to get people to support what you want to do.
Right, right. I'm always thinking with the housing options, they come and go so quickly. Like the offer to purchase, that land's only going to be, if we don't get our hands on it, it might go. And then there's a dozen things that can go wrong. Like the three that we have, the one that we got that we voted on, that the town voted to supplement the money that to purchase. There's a big family argument. That deal could fall through, or we might get it, but it could fall through. So, I mean, those types of things, we could end up with no actual land to build on, even though we had these successes. And I will say, I'm a little more critical. I always look at it personally for myself. I want to know what I can do better next time. It doesn't discourage me. It encourages me to work harder and to dig deeper and to not make the same mistakes again. I know sometimes when I speak, it's discouraging for other people. So that's why we got Brett here to spin it into a positive. But that's my nature, just to find like what could I do better next time.
Go for it.
Thank you. But thank you for that tip. We'll definitely pursue that.
So, Carolyn, I might also just add, I think and then we'll go to Jen Cusack and then Sally Diggs. I think that is certainly one of the reasons why at the CDP we've strongly encouraged towns to create municipal housing trusts and adequately fund them, because that way you've got funding to be able to purchase real estate and be able to do it quickly and not have to wait for the town meeting cycle to occur. So Jen Cusack.
Hi, this has been great. Thank you. I was just wondering if there are any similar groups to yours in other surrounding towns on the Lower and Outer Cape that you're aware of, and if so, are you doing any collaboration with them?
Brett.
Yeah, I mean, nothing exactly the same, I think. But through the CDP, there's been efforts to highlight what they were calling housing champions from Lower Cape towns, and they pulled together a group of folks who in many different ways are working on organizing around housing. Some are involved in committees and some are finding other ways to advocate or get involved. And some are just awesome people who are looking to connect with others. So that's going on. So yeah, we've connected into that group. We've asked them for advice if we had any issues. One, actually, we're really interested in this whole thing with virtual participation that's happening now with select boards and committees, and wondering one day might town meetings also have a virtual aspect, because we feel like if that did, we would win on everything. So we had some interesting buzz around that concept, and paying attention to what other towns are doing. And then the other one I'll just shout out is I see Cindy Horgan is on the line with the Cape Children's Place, and one of the aspects that the Chatham 365, one of the issues that we had prioritized a while ago was early childhood education. And making that affordable, accessible, and creating models that work for the community. And there's a Cape-wide effort to push for state legislation around that. I apologize, Cindy, I'm totally forgetting the name. It's something START.
Common Start.
Common Start, thank you. The Common Start Coalition. And so we're sort of keeping our eyes and getting inspired by what they're doing. And I think when the time is right, we'll definitely collaborate on that front.
Thanks, Brett. Sally.
I just wonder if when you're looking at different ways to create affordable housing, if also in your sort of basket of tools is when you have existing housing stock, not all of them are, I realize Chatham has a very high median price, but it means there are also properties that are available lower that are just, just houses. And whether or not creating a pot of money that can just help people buy a house, put a second mortgage on that eventually the town gets repaid. But it gives, it doesn't require necessarily as much a public approval process, and also offers, sort of for your committee to keep them energized. Well, can we raise, enough to help 3 families this year buy a house? I mean, I don't know if you have that tool already, but if you don't, it might be one worth considering, because the cost of building housing here is just mind-boggling. And so if there's some way to make better use of some of the existing housing stock, that might give you an additional avenue to think about.
I think you're talking like a buy down program.
It could just be a second mortgage, which gets it into the realm where a family can afford the mortgage.
Right.
I mean, because it isn't just, people with low incomes who can't afford them. It's people with middle and moving on up the scale who can't afford to buy a house in Chatham.
Right. I think I wish we had implemented a program like that earlier. It's really a hard sell now because the pricing point is so high.
Yeah.
And the rebuttal is, I mean, we just had some of this comments, we had the negative comments at town meeting about like why, even if you try to help a higher price point, like why would we give them money to buy a house for $600,000? Like it's going to be a really hard sell. It's a good program. And I just really wish we had done it earlier when the price points were a little bit lower, but you really can't buy a house in Chatham, even a dilapidated house. I don't think you're gonna get one under 6.
Yeah, I just wondered if, I don't know what additional subsidy you look for after you buy the land, but usually you need an additional subsidy then to get it down to a level that people can afford anyway. So
right.
I just sort of wonder if there's more than one way to come at this.
Well,
So Sally, we've
on.
actually been, this is certainly one of the tools that's often in the arsenal, and I think Carolyn has probably hit the nail on the head that this would have been a great tool 10 years ago. But Ann Robinson from our staff, who's our chief program officer, has been working on a similar effort in Wellfleet. And Ann, I think if you could kind of share with folks what's gone on there, it might be quite illuminating about an example of what this challenge is.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Wellfleet has had a buy down program now for, I think about 7 or 8 years, and they were successful in the beginning of getting homeowners into town. But in the last couple of years, the prices have gone through the roof. And right now, the median price of a home in Wellfleet is $650,000. We've got a potential buyer right now who has received $175,000 subsidy from Wellfleet, and he just may be able to buy a home for $415,000, but it needs a lot of work. And then that raises the question of where does that money come from for be able to make the repairs that are necessary. In all likelihood, Wellfleet's also going to have to provide the full amount of their down payment assistance of $20,000. So the town's going to have almost $200,000 into this house, and the numbers still may not work. So, and interestingly, I had a conversation with a woman from DHCD today who called me up and said, what's your opinion on how these programs work? And I said, well, I think they worked okay in the past, but unless the towns are willing to put an awful lot of subsidy into them now, I don't think they're feasible anymore.
And when you then think about, while we do have significant resources here on the Outer and Lower Cape at a municipal level, we also have a significant need. And when you think about a typical large rental development, where within a town, a municipal investment of $20,000 to $30,000 per unit, $400,000 can leverage a lot of state and federal resources and meet a lot more need than putting $200,000 into a buy down. Other questions in the couple minutes that we've got left for Brett or Carolyn, or comments?
Jay, it's Shirley
Yeah.
Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to comment on what Sally said about to find a home that is affordable. About 2 years ago, a private group, and Carolyn was part of it in the beginning, and I was also, came about and said that they would buy this house and they didn't want any government interference. They would buy it, and the group of people that did buy it, they had a lot of people that came in and redid the floors, they did the re-landscaping, they did the roof. Some of them did it pro bono, some of them did it at cost, right across from the elementary school on Toll Road. And that was very successful. And then what they did was they turned it over to the town, and it became part of our MCI program, which I think most of you know about our MCI program. And that is one way to get people, into town. And what my hope is, and Jay, maybe you can help me with this, since we passed the tax fee, that has to go to the state legislature before it really is okay. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
We passed at the town meeting, we passed the tax fee on the houses that are $2 million and over.
A transfer tax, yeah.
Transfer
And I-
tax.
Yeah.
But that has to go to the state legislature and be passed before we can do it, yes or no?
Yes.
That is true. It will have to go to the state legislature to be passed, and I think that there's a snowball's chance in hell that will happen.
You don't
Unfortunately,
think it will?
no.
do not
In fact, I would bet a lot of money on the fact that it won't happen. So, unfortunately, in the deliberation of the state budget a year ago, a not very politically savvy state representative insisted on a forced vote on a similar transfer tax initiative. It got 20 votes. So when you get a vote on record and only get 20 votes in support of it, the leadership in the House is very unlikely to allow such a measure to come up for a vote again. The second problem with the real estate transfer tax as well is that the powers that be in Beacon Hill are also very much aware that our towns are now collecting in excess of $500,000 to $1 million annually in short-term rental tax money. I think that the real priority that we ought to be working on now is channeling those short-term rental dollars into housing trusts. That's not possible in Orleans because those funds are being used to finance the new wastewater system, although that is going to be very helpful, having a wastewater system in Orleans to being able to develop affordable housing. But I've had a conversation with both Rep. Peake and Senator Scheer, have been real clear that it's certainly a nice vote to take at town meeting, and it sends a message. But if we really want to make progress today, we've got dollars coming in the door, and we ought to grab them for housing. And that's where I would really encourage folks to be channeling their energies and efforts.
Okay, and another thing, when we were the Affordable Housing Committee, as Carolyn mentioned in the very beginning, we were constricted to what we could do. And that's when we decided to go to the select board and say, we want to change our name to the Chatham Community Housing Partnership. So that opened up a few more doors for us, that we could go out and about, and we were not constricted by just being affordable housing. So that was a very, very good move. And I'm going to give kudos to Carolyn. Since I stepped down as chairman, and Carolyn was voted in as chairman. And Carolyn has been the chairman. There's been a lot happening, and I know she does get discouraged, and I'm her best booster, and I call and keep her going. And now that she's met up with Brett, I do think that we're going to be seeing more and more good, positive things that will be happening. But those two are real dynamos. So thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
I-
Well, Brett and Carolyn, any closing comments before we wrap up?
A quick question. When was that vote that happened in the Senate, the forced vote that only got the 20? How long ago was that?
That was in the House, and I believe it happened in June of 2020 when the FY21 state budget was under consideration.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe one just quick little story. Thanks everybody for being on. Good to see you. Thanks for all the questions. One kind of interesting thing that happened with the town meeting with that vote that we didn't get. Some of the folks that voted no were actually part of our 365 network, either because they were concerned about the elementary school or they really liked some of the other housing articles we were pushing for. And there was two folks in particular I know, I think there were more, but two folks, after the town meeting was over, and it was heated, you know, it was hard. And, you know, maybe you're hearing some of that from Carolyn and I with that one in particular, but this is so cool. Two of the folks that voted against got right back in touch with us. And they were like, all right, what's the next thing that we can do? Like, what are we going to do with the elementary school? What's the next housing, you know, effort that we can push for? And I thought that was interesting because I think that's a sign where we can build something where folks can disagree pretty heatedly, you know, once in a while, but there's a core mission and value and vision that people are rallying around, where like one, you know, hard vote won't get them out of our network or working together. So I was really inspired by that. I think that was something special that we have going. And so if other folks on the call like want to get involved or stay in the loop, you know, our website is chatham365.org. We have a newsletter. So I'd love to get you connected.
Great.
Thanks, Jay, for having us. This is great.
Brett, Carolyn, thank you so much. And, you know, this is an effort that the CDP is really supportive of. And I think one of the things we have been doing is some exploration of how we can be more supportive and also help other communities that would like to replicate this as a community engagement and community advocacy model. So stay tuned and more to come. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, and hope to see you all in August at our summer evening on the farm event on August 25th. So have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.